Ethan Cole had always lived a quiet life. He was a 32-year-old man with a steady job as an accountant and a peaceful two-bedroom house in a suburban neighborhood. He didn't have many friends, but he was content. He spent his weekends watching sports, working on small home improvement projects, and occasionally meeting up with his girlfriend, Sarah. However, something about his house didn't feel quite right. It was a small, cozy space, decorated with the furniture he had bought piece by piece. Lately, though, he had been feeling increasingly uncomfortable. His thoughts were clouded with a strange sense of unease, like he was being watched, even when he was alone in the house. It wasn't until one evening, when he was cleaning his bedroom, that he made the discovery. Ethan had been rearranging the drawers of his nightstand when he noticed something odd. It was a small, round device attached to the baseboard beneath his dresser. It was tiny, nearly the size of a button, and it seemed to be positioned in a way that suggested it had been placed there deliberately. His heart skipped a beat as he crouched down to examine it more closely. A small lens glinted in the dim light. His first thought was that it could be a hidden camera. But who would put a camera in his room? And why? With shaky hands, he used a small knife to carefully detach the device from the wall. He brought it up to his face and saw that it had a tiny red light blinking faintly. It was working. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he had found. Someone had been watching him. But the question was, who? And for how long? His immediate instinct was to turn off the camera and look for more. But the thought of someone else having access to his private life made him feel sick to his stomach. He wasn't even sure where to begin looking. He thought back to the past few months. Had anything seemed out of the ordinary? He had received some strange phone calls, but nothing that stood out. His neighbors were friendly, but not overly so. His girlfriend, Sarah, had been distant lately, but he had chalked it up to stress from work. Suddenly, a cold shiver ran down his spine as another thought occurred to him. What if the camera wasn't the only one? He thought about the rest of the house, every room, every corner. His heart started to race as he realized that the camera might be just the tip of the iceberg. He needed answers. Ethan felt the need to confront whoever had invaded his privacy. But as he stared at the small device in his hand, he realized that the discovery was just the beginning of something much bigger. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth, whatever it was going to be far more sinister than he could imagine. Ethan couldn't sit still. The small camera in his hand felt like a ticking bomb, its weight heavier with each passing second. His mind was racing, running through every possible scenario, but none of them brought him any closer to understanding what was really happening. He had to find out more. The first step was obvious. He needed to check the rest of the house. He couldn't risk missing another hidden device. With a deep breath, he turned on his phone's flashlight and began his search. Every room, every corner, every nook. He started with the living room. As he scanned the space, his mind kept replaying moments from the past few months. He thought back to the strange feelings of being watched, the odd sense that someone knew what he was doing even when he was alone. Could it have been the camera? Or was there something else at play here? In the living room, nothing seemed out of place. He moved to the kitchen next, his heart beating louder with every step. As he opened cabinets, checked under the sink, and peered inside the refrigerator, his thoughts grew darker. He felt the weight of his own paranoia pushing in on him. Maybe he was just overreacting. Maybe the camera was a one-time thing, a random incident. But then he found it. In the corner of the kitchen, near the window, was a small black device that resembled a smoke detector. Ethan's stomach churned as he reached for it. He twisted it from the wall, and to his horror, a small lens was hidden beneath the plastic cover. It was another camera. His hands shook as he took it down. The blinking red light confirmed it once again. He was being watched. But now the question burned deeper. Who was watching him? Ethan's mind shifted from confusion to anger. This wasn't just an innocent mistake. Someone had been intentionally spying on him, and they knew exactly what they were doing. He couldn't help but feel a sense of violation, like a stranger had invaded his home and his most private moments. He couldn't stop now. He had to find the source, confront them. He looked around the kitchen, his mind already jumping to conclusions. Was Sarah involved? She had been distant, but was that really enough to suspect her? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise from the hallway. Ethan froze. He wasn't alone. The soft creak of the floorboards was unmistakable. Someone was walking through the house. His heart raced as he quickly shoved the two cameras into his pocket and hurried into the hallway. He didn't know who or what was lurking in the shadows, but he needed to find out. He took a deep breath and cautiously crept toward the living room. There, standing in the doorway, was Sarah. She looked just as surprised to see him as he was to see her. Her eyes widened when she saw him holding the cameras. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing with those?" Ethan didn't say a word. His mind was working faster than he could process. The question on the tip of his tongue was one he needed answered now. "Sarah, are you the one behind this?" he demanded. Her expression faltered, and for the briefest moment, Ethan saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. Fear? Guilt? It was hard to say, but then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, Ethan, I swear. I don't know anything about those." Ethan wasn't convinced. He needed the truth. But something told him that Sarah wasn't going to be the one to give it to him. He took a step back. "Then who? Who the hell is spying on me?" Sarah looked at him, her face pale, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I think you're in danger." Ethan didn't know what to make of her words, but the fear in her voice felt real. A part of him wanted to believe her, but the other part of him was certain that something much darker was happening here, something he still didn't understand. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of Sarah's words hanging heavy in the air. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. He wanted to trust her, but the discovery of the cameras had left him questioning everything. Was she lying? Was she involved in some way? Or was she just as much a victim as he was? "Sarah." Ethan's voice broke the silence, his tone cautious but firm. "Why do you think I'm in danger? What do you know?" She hesitated, glancing down at the floor as though gathering her thoughts. Her fingers nervously twitched at her sides. Then, with a sigh, she slowly looked up at him. "I didn't want to tell you, Ethan," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "But I think it's time you know." Ethan's heart pounded as he watched her. He could feel the tension between them, a strange sense of anticipation building in his chest. This was the moment when everything would either make sense or spiral further into chaos. She took a deep breath before continuing. "A few weeks ago, I started noticing things. Little things, at first, like how you seemed different, more on edge. I thought it was stress, maybe from work or something else. But then I found something strange." Ethan frowned. "What did you find?" Sarah glanced around nervously, her eyes darting to the hallway, as if she expected someone to jump out from the shadows. "I found a hidden camera," she confessed. Ethan's blood ran cold. "What?" he breathed, his voice shaky. "Yes," she nodded. "I found it in your study, behind the bookshelf. I didn't want to scare you, so I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was just a mistake. But then, I started to feel like someone was watching me too. Like they knew where I was, what I was doing. I didn't know what to think, Ethan. I started feeling like I was losing my mind." Ethan's mind raced. "You found a camera?" "In my study." She nodded again. "Yes, and I didn't know what to do. So, I started looking around the house. I found another one in the living room, right above the mantel. I almost didn't tell you, but I kept thinking that someone must be spying on us. It wasn't just one camera. It's like someone has been living here with us, watching every move." Ethan's hands trembled as the reality of what she was saying sank in. He thought of the cameras he had found, the one in the kitchen, the one in his bedroom, and a cold, creeping fear settled over him. But who would do this? And why? He could feel the anger rising in his chest. "But who, Sarah? Who would do this to us? Do you think it's someone from my past?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out, but everything feels off. The cameras, the feeling of being watched, it's all too much. It's like we're being hunted. And I think the person watching us, they might be closer than we think." Ethan felt a chill spread through him. The idea that someone he knew, or at least someone close to him, was involved sent a wave of nausea through his stomach. The possibilities were endless, and none of them were comforting. "I need to know everything you found," he said, his voice stern. "Where else did you find cameras? Have you seen anything strange? Any signs that someone has been here?" Sarah bit her lip nervously before answering. "I haven't found any more cameras, but I have found things. Small things. Like a coffee mug moved from one side of the counter to the other, or the pillow on the couch shifted slightly. It's subtle, but it's enough to make me think. Someone has been in this house. When we weren't here." Ethan's mind raced. If someone had been in the house while they were gone, then they had access to everything. his private life, his home. The thought made him feel like a puppet, strings pulled by an unseen hand. But then, something clicked in his mind. There was one person who had been in his life. Recently, someone who might have known where he lived, who could have easily accessed his home without suspicion. His heart skipped a beat. "Sarah, has anyone been here recently?" he asked, his voice suddenly filled with urgency. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? You mean like a visitor?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Someone who knows us. Someone who could have set this up." Sarah looked confused. "I don't. Did you tell anyone about the cameras?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "Anyone else?" A faint blush crept into Sarah's cheeks as she looked away. I I didn't tell you this, but I talked to my sister, Jessica, about it. I was scared, Ethan. I didn't know who to turn to." Ethan's mind went blank for a moment. Jessica. He remembered her. Sarah's younger sister, who had visited the house just a few weeks ago. She had seemed perfectly normal, but the idea of her knowing about the cameras made his stomach churn. "Did Jessica know about my house?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Yes. She came over once to help me with something. But I didn't think it was important, Ethan. She's family." But something inside Ethan told him that this wasn't a coincidence. If someone had been watching them all this time, and if Jessica had known about the cameras, it was no longer just a random act of invasion. It was something personal. Someone had been setting them up, and now, with the truth hanging heavy in the air, Ethan realized that the nightmare was only just beginning. Ethan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. His mind kept circling back to Jessica, Sarah's sister. There was something about her visit that didn't sit right with him. He tried to push the thought aside, but the more he thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. Sarah was looking at him now, her face full of concern. "Ethan, please, what are you thinking? Do you really think Jessica could be involved in this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned and walked toward the window, pulling the blinds open just a crack to peer out at the quiet street outside. The world seemed so normal, so peaceful. How could it be possible that someone was so close, watching them from the shadows? "I don't know, Sarah," he finally said, his voice strained. "But something's not adding up. The fact that you found cameras. And now this, Jessica knowing about the house, about the cameras. It just doesn't feel like a coincidence." Sarah looked shocked. "You think my sister is spying on us?" Ethan hesitated, unsure if he wanted to say the words aloud. But something deep inside told him that Jessica might not be as innocent as she appeared. "I don't know," he muttered, turning back to face her. "But I have to find out." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he knew he needed to take action. He needed to talk to Jessica directly, ask her what she knew, what she had seen. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about hidden cameras anymore. This was about his life, his safety, and the people he trusted. "Sarah, I'm going to call Jessica," he said, his voice determined. "I need to know what she knows. If she's involved in this, then I need to confront her." Sarah seemed torn. "Ethan, please. I don't want to believe that my sister could be involved. She's my family. I've known her my whole life. She wouldn't do something like this." But Ethan could see the uncertainty in her eyes. He knew Sarah was struggling to reconcile what she thought she knew about her sister with the possibility that Jessica was hiding something far darker. He dialed Jessica's number and waited as the phone rang. His fingers drummed nervously against the side of his leg. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the call was answered. "Hello." Jessica's voice came through the speaker, sounding casual, almost too casual. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Jessica, it's Ethan." "Oh, hey, Ethan. What's up?" She responded, her tone cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. "I need to talk to you about something," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady despite the growing anxiety. "I want to know if you've been in the house recently. Have you been inside since the last time you visited?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Yeah. I came over a couple of weeks ago." "Why? Is something wrong?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "I need to know if you've been back when I wasn't here. Have you?" Jessica hesitated again, her response slower now. "Ethan, I don't know what you're getting at. I told you I was just helping Sarah with something. Nothing weird happened." Ethan's patience was wearing thin. "Jessica, I found cameras in the house. You told Sarah you were here, and now I'm asking if you had anything to do with this. What do you know?" Her silence on the other end of the phone felt like an eternity. Ethan could hear her breathing, sharp and fast. She wasn't saying anything, but the longer she stayed silent, the more his suspicion grew. Finally, after a long pause, Jessica spoke, her voice quieter now, almost anxious. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Ethan," she said in a low voice, almost a whisper. "I swear I didn't." Ethan's heart raced. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" I didn't put the cameras there," Jessica confessed, her voice shaky. "But I know who did." Ethan's mind reeled. "Who?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Who's behind this?" There was another long pause. Ethan could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the weight of his growing fear pressing on him. Then, Jessica's voice came through, barely audible. "Ethan, it's someone you know. Someone who's been close to you for a long time." A cold wave washed over him as his mind raced to find an answer. "Who, Jessica? Who?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But you need to trust me. You need to leave. They're watching you." The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone, his hands trembling. He couldn't breathe. He had hoped for some kind of clarity, for some understanding of what was happening. But now everything was more confusing than ever. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice shaking. "She knows something. Jessica knows something, and she won't tell me who did this." Sarah walked over to him, her face pale. "What did she say?" Ethan looked up at her, his mind racing. "She said it's someone I know, someone close. And then she told me to leave, that I'm being watched." The silence between them was deafening. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just behind him, watching, waiting. The walls of his home, the place that should have been his sanctuary, felt like they were closing in on him. "You need to trust me, Ethan," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get out of here." But where would they go? And who could they trust? The truth was, they didn't even know who was watching them. The answers were elusive, hidden behind a wall of secrets that Ethan wasn't sure he could tear down. And somewhere, in the darkness, the unseen hand continued to pull the strings. Ethan's mind was spinning, his heart racing as Sarah's words lingered in the air. "We need to get out of here." But where could they go? What would they do? He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, each breath harder than the last. The feeling of being watched had never been more intense. And now, knowing someone was spying on them, someone close, made it worse. He couldn't escape the nagging fear that someone was always a step ahead. "Sarah, I think we should leave," Ethan finally said, his voice strained with uncertainty. "But we can't just run. We need to figure out who's behind this, why they're doing this." Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. "But we can't stay here either. Whoever is doing this knows where we are. And if they've been watching us for this long." She trailed off, unable to finish her thought. The weight of her words settled over him like a suffocating blanket. He couldn't just wait around and hope everything would go back to normal. The truth was, they were in danger, and the clock was ticking. Ethan paced around the living room, his mind racing through every possible scenario. "Do you think Jessica really knows something? Or is she just trying to cover her tracks?" "I don't know," Sarah said, her voice quiet. But something about what she said, it didn't sound like she was lying. "I think she's scared too." Ethan's fingers drummed against the side of his leg as he tried to make sense of everything. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger at play here, something more than just a random invasion of privacy. The cameras, the strange phone calls, the subtle signs that they were being followed. Everything pointed to one thing. Someone had been stalking them, watching their every move. "I need to find out who's behind this," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I can't keep living in fear. I need answers." Sarah looked at him, worry etched on her face. "How are we going to do that? We don't even know who it is. Whoever's behind this is playing a game, and we're just pawns." Ethan's eyes narrowed, a sudden realization dawning on him. It's a game, all right. And the person pulling the strings wants us to be scared. They want us to panic and run. But that's exactly what they're counting on. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We need to stay calm. We need to figure out where the cameras are coming from, who has access to the house. And most importantly, we need to find out who is watching us." He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. "But we can't do this alone. We need help." Sarah hesitated. "Who do we turn to?" "We can't trust anyone, Ethan. Not after everything that's happened." Ethan's mind flashed to a name. It was risky, but it was the only lead he had. "There's one person I can think of. Someone who might know what's going on." Sarah's eyes widened. "Who?" "Detective Lawson." He's a former cop I worked with a few years ago. He's a little unorthodox, but he's got connections. If anyone can help us, it's him. Sarah didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. All right, but if he can't help us, we're on our own. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. This wasn't going to be easy, and there was no guarantee it would work. But it was their only shot. They had to find out who was behind this before it was too late. The next morning, Ethan and Sarah drove to the outskirts of town, to a small, rundown building tucked away behind a row of shops. The faded sign above the door read, Lawson Investigations. Ethan's stomach twisted as they parked, the weight of what they were about to do pressing heavily on his chest. He wasn't sure what to expect from Detective Lawson. The last time they'd spoken, he'd been working on a missing persons case, and they hadn't kept in touch since. But Ethan needed answers, and Lawson was the only person he could trust right now. They entered the building, the door creaking as it swung open. Inside, the place was dimly lit, with stacks of old files and papers scattered across desks. A man in his mid-40s sat behind a cluttered desk, his feet propped up on the edge. He looked up when they entered, his face breaking into a crooked grin. Well, if it isn't Ethan Cole, Detective Lawson said, his voice gravelly. It's been a long time. What brings you to my humble office? Ethan didn't waste any time. I need your help, Lawson. It's urgent. The detective raised an eyebrow. Urgent, huh? Sounds serious. What's going on? Ethan explained the situation as best he could, recounting everything, the hidden cameras, the strange feelings of being watched, the phone calls, and Jessica's cryptic warning. As he spoke, Lawson listened intently, his expression hardening with each new detail. Sounds like someone's got a pretty good setup, Lawson said when Ethan finished. Whoever's doing this knows what they're doing, and they're not playing around. Ethan leaned forward. We need to find out who's behind it, Lawson. We need to stop them before they escalate. Lawson nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. All right, I'll help you. But this is going to take time. We need to be careful. Whoever's behind this is probably watching us right now. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The detective was right. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Thank you, Ethan said, his voice steady. We're counting on you. As they left the office, Ethan felt a sense of cautious hope. Detective Lawson had agreed to help, but the danger was far from over. Whoever was watching them was still out there, waiting for their next move. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse before they got better. But one thing was clear. They weren't going to stop until they uncovered the truth. Ethan felt a deep, unsettling sense of urgency in the pit of his stomach as he and Sarah sat in the car, parked just outside Detective Lawson's office. The sun was beginning to set, casting a pale, orange glow over the streets, but it did little to lift the heaviness that had settled over them. The truth was coming closer, too close, and it wasn't going to be pretty. After what felt like an eternity, Lawson had called them with the breakthrough they desperately needed. He had traced a few unusual patterns in the data he'd been gathering, and now, it was time to confront the person responsible for the cameras, the surveillance, the game they had all been trapped in. Are you ready? Sarah asked, her voice quiet but filled with a nervous edge. She didn't need to ask. Ethan could see the same fear in her eyes that he felt. But there was no turning back now. No, he said, his voice hoarse. But we have no choice. It's time to end this. They both stepped out of the car, the weight of their decision hanging heavily over them. Ethan's mind was racing, jumping between possibilities. Who was it? What would they find? He couldn't stop thinking about Jessica's last words. You're being watched. What did she know? Had she been trying to warn them, or was she involved in some twisted way? The detective's office was quiet as they entered. Lawson greeted them with a nod, his face grim. Got something for you, he said, leading them to the back room, where a large board was pinned with pictures, notes, and pieces of string connecting different clues. It looked like a crime scene investigation, and in a way it was. Lawson didn't waste time. I found the IP addresses that accessed the cameras, he said, pointing to a screen that displayed a list of activity. Turns out, the person who set this all up didn't need to be physically in the house to watch you. They were accessing everything remotely. Ethan stepped closer, trying to make sense of the data. So, they've been watching us for months? Not just watching, Lawson replied. They've been gathering information. Every time you left the house, every time you made a phone call, every text message sent, they knew it all. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He couldn't comprehend the depth of the violation. His life had been reduced to data points, to something that could be monitored and controlled. "And who is it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with the question that had haunted them both. Lawson took a deep breath before turning to face them. "The person behind this is someone you both know very well." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" His voice came out barely more than a whisper. But Lawson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned the screen toward them, revealing the name that would change everything. It was Jessica. Ethan's legs went weak. He felt the floor beneath him shift, as though the earth itself was unraveling. "Jessica." Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. "No, no, that's not possible. She's my sister. She couldn't." Lawson's expression was somber. "I didn't believe it at first, either. But everything points to her. The camera placements, the IP addresses, the timestamps. Everything. Jessica was the one who set it up. And the worst part? She's been using your house as her base of operations. She's been living here, monitoring you without you knowing." Sarah stumbled back, as if physically struck. "But why? Why would she do this?" Ethan felt like the room was closing in on him. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Jessica? His mind couldn't process the betrayal, the anger that suddenly burned inside him. It felt like a nightmare that he couldn't wake from. "She was trying to get something from you," Lawson explained, his voice low and matter-of-fact. "She was after your inheritance. Ethan, she knew about your family's estate, your parents' will, the money you were set to receive. She knew about your life, your routines, everything. She was playing the long game, waiting for the right moment to take control." Ethan's world spun, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place in a way that made no sense. "That doesn't make sense. Jessica was never interested in money. She's not anymore." Lawson cut him off. "The cameras, the surveillance, it wasn't just about watching you. It was about knowing when you'd slip up, when you'd be vulnerable. She wasn't just gathering information about your life. She was setting you up to fail." Ethan's chest tightened. "But I don't understand. If she wanted the money, why didn't she just take it?" "That's the thing," Lawson said, his tone sharp. "She didn't need to take it. She was manipulating you, playing with your mind, making you doubt everyone around you, especially Sarah. She was isolating you, getting you to question reality. And once you were weak enough, she'd move in for the kill." Ethan felt sick. He could barely comprehend the twisted scheme Jessica had set into motion. And now, with the truth laid bare before him, he realized just how close they had come to losing everything. But there was one thing that still didn't make sense. "So, where is she now?" Ethan asked, his voice thick with anger and confusion. Lawson's face darkened. "That's the thing. Jessica's gone. She's already one step ahead. When I tried to track her movements, I hit a wall. She's erased her tracks, disappeared without a trace." Ethan slammed his fist against the desk. "She's gone? After everything, she's just gone?" "She's not done," Lawson said, his voice grave. "She's out there, and she's still watching. But now you know who's behind this. And that's a start." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. Jessica wasn't just a criminal. She was someone he had trusted, someone who had played him for a fool. But now that he knew the truth, he wasn't going to let her get away with it. "We'll find her," Ethan said, his voice hard with resolve. "I don't care where she is. We'll find her." Sarah looked at him, her face pale but determined. "We'll find her together." And with that, Ethan knew the game wasn't over. It was just beginning.